Hello and welcome. My name is Meredith, and I am one of your career coaches with American Public University System. Today's webinar is the last part of our summer resume writing series. If you missed the other three, I encourage you to go back on our Career Services YouTube channel to review the previous three on resume best practices, just starting out, and writing a federal resume. This final topic is on transitioning a federal resume to the private sector, because as we all probably know, there are some differences. I myself spent over 10 years working in federal roles and made that transition into the private sector, so I understand the challenge of paring down a resume to the 2 pages, plus formatting it in the language and format that private sector hiring officials are used to. So while this webinar is intended for those who already have a federal resume and are hoping to turn it into a private sector one, it will also offer many general private sector resume tips and best practices. So either way, you are in the right place. I hope you'll get something out of this. Keep in mind as we go through this, it's not going to be just about switching jobs. It's about shifting how you position and present yourself entirely to a whole new audience. So today we're going to break down transitioning that federal resume into private sector by using the 5 steps you see here on the agenda, focusing on accomplishments and transferable skills, translating experience, tailoring, and even incorporating some AI tools. But we'll start first by comparing some of the assumed differences between federal and private sector, as well as a brief update on some current changes going on with the federal resume that actually makes this presentation very relevant to your federal resumes right now as well, not just private sector. Toward the end, we're going to take a closer look at a federal turned private sector resume and how you can use AI prompts along with a specific job description to help you make that transition. Alrighty, so I'm not sure if any of you have been looking at any job postings on USA Jobs recently, where the majority of federal jobs are posted. I know at the time of this recording, we are still in a hiring freeze, so there are less on there, but we do still have a lot of like security and health positions on there. But if you have been on there, you may have seen some changes in some of the job postings because we are making a big transition. We, as in the federal government, Office of Personnel Management. So basically gone may be the days of the long 5+ page federal resume. With the Office of Personnel Management's new merit hiring plan released at the end of May 2025, federal job seekers are facing a major shift. Resumes are transitioning to a 2-page maximum, just like private sector. So this webinar is not only on transitioning to private sector, but most of it will also now apply to transitioning your resume in general to 2 pages. We also have just put out an article that provides additional tips on specifically getting your federal resume down to 2 pages, while remembering to still include all those federal requirements. This article, you can find it on Edge. It talks about making that transition. It is not a complete guide to writing a federal resume. I encourage you to always still refer to the job announcements, USA Jobs Help Center for that, and utilize that resume builder found on USA Jobs for federal resumes. That's so that you can make sure to include all the pieces. And it's also really important to note that that 2-page max is not across the board yet, at least so at this time. Some announcements are saying 2 pages, while others are still allowing that 5-page resume. So you have to, at this point, look closely at each one and be prepared with either. All right, before we dive into transitioning your federal resume to private sector, I want to start with a question. When you think of differences between federal and private sector, what are some of the main ones that typically come to mind? Now, obviously, we already talked about length. That is one of the biggest, of course. but you may be familiar with others. And we're going to share a couple charts here. Keep in mind, looking at these next two charts, some of these differences are more from the past. We've already moved away from them. But if you haven't changed your resume in a while, or maybe you've been in the same federal position for years, it might be what you're still used to. So it's good to really understand these differences, and it's now a good time to update that federal resume too. So let's start with the biggest shift. Really understanding that your resume for private sector, it's not just a record of your duties, it is a marketing tool. This applies for federal resumes too. In fact, studies show that hiring managers in the private sector spend an average of 6 to 8 seconds scanning a resume. That's it. So your job is to quickly and clearly tell them, here's what I've done, here's why it matters to you. So if you're still copy and pasting entire job descriptions into your resumes, stop. Neither want to see all that. It's true that more detail does typically go into federal. Private sector, you don't normally need to put your hours worked, or sometimes when they ask for salary, job address, supervisor info that you see on federal, not usually needing all of that in private sector. Job titles will be different. We're going to talk about those in the translation section, but we don't need those GS grade level titles. We need to translate that. And knowing your audience and targeting your resume to them is a big one as well. A couple other ones, private sector may rely more on applicant tracking system and quick scans. Metrics are stressed more, and attachments are less common. So we're going to go into more detail with some of these as we dive into our 5 steps to transition. Let's start with our first practical step, because before you can reshape your resume, you need to know what's worth highlighting. All right, step 1. Like you may often hear us say as coaches, the purpose of a resume is to land an interview. Hiring officials want to, again, quickly look through a resume and see those accomplishments you achieved at previous jobs, and almost be able to like fantasize about you bringing those same things to the private sector, to their company. So hopefully you are already including accomplishments in your federal resume and can easily adjust them to match private sector priorities and language. I really like these questions you see in the middle of the slide here to help you think about accomplishments in this frame. How did I add value? What did I improve, save, lead, or create? And I didn't make a whole step on this piece, but also keep in mind relevance is key. And that's going to be a part of every step. So when you're trying to narrow down that resume and you're trying to think of what to take off and what to keep, relevance to each job is key. If it doesn't apply at all to this new job, what you did, if it's years ago, all these different things, then it doesn't need to be there. They want to see what you did that qualifies you for this job, that prepared you for this job specifically you're applying for. So let's look at a federal accomplishment you may have on a resume and how we can make sure it's in private sector terms. So federal style, I'll read the one here, and then that example is the private sector transition. So federal style, maybe we say something like coordinated acquisition planning and contract administration for multiple federal procurement actions in accordance with FAR, DFARS, and agency-specific policies. So now let's look at that private sector one that you can see there. Oversaw end-to-end procurement process for $3.5 million in contracts, accelerating award timelines by 25%, and maintaining 100% compliance with federal acquisition. So you can see some of these key differences. If you remember the federal one, it used a lot of formal terms like acquisition, planning. It referred to specific regulations, while the private sector focuses more on business impact terms. End-to-end process, accelerating timelines. And you can see too, we made sure to include a lot of metrics up front in that example. The federal one, again, it focused on a lot of process and compliance, while the private sector results, efficiency, outcomes. So you might be wondering, how and where do I really figure out these accomplishments? I have my job duties that I did, but how can I really think of accomplishments? Now, if any of you were in last week's presentation with Chip from the United States Secret Service, when he presented on federal resumes, he had a great slide on this exactly. So you can refer back if you get a chance, but also I have some of his suggestions here, which are you can look back to if you've ever received letters of appreciation or recommendation, feedback from coworkers, friends, customers, supervisors, the public that you worked with. Performance reports are a great one. Award citations. Another great place to look if you're trying to think of accomplishments is other people's resumes. Go to LinkedIn, look at people who are in the roles that you desire to be in, that you're trying to transition to, apply for, or even just in general. What do people write in their resumes or profiles as accomplishments to help give you ideas? All right, next step. So once you've identified your key accomplishments, we're going to look across your career for the skills that carry over, no matter the sector. These are the skills that are valuable in both government and private industry. Things like leadership, communication, problem solving, project management, digital literacy is a big one right now. So what changes is how you frame them. For instance, in a federal resume, if you said coordinated interagency communications, that might translate better to managed multi-stakeholder communication strategy in the private world. So just again, so using those terms that they use, that they're used to, you want to use your resume strategically to highlight these skills. You can start with a strong skills summary. That's not as common in federal resumes, but private sector often have those skills summary at the top. But then make sure to back it up with examples in your experience section or any special projects that you did are related. This is especially important if you're shifting into a new industry. Showing how your existing skills apply across environments helps employers connect those dots. You want to make it easy for them to see how your experience, your skills directly transfer to the jobs that they have that you're interested in. All right, step 3 is to translate your experience. And I mean that literally in some ways, translating government terms into business language. So things to keep in mind, we want to avoid acronyms. Both government and military have a lot of them. Not everyone knows what they mean. Probably most people don't know what they mean. Even some of us in those industries don't know what they mean. Internal policy terms, grade level titles that don't mean anything to someone outside federal HR. Instead, we want to focus on function. So both with those GS titles and military titles, we need to translate and figure out what are those common job titles in the private sector that they would understand better. So instead of saying maybe a program analyst GS13, that might translate best to an operations lead. It is okay to change titles to better match what their equivalent is in private sector jobs. And again, that goes for military as well. There are military translator sites, apps that can help with that, as well as AI, artificial intelligence can be very helpful with that, with the right prompts of asking, translating this to more civilian terms type of thing. And remember, it's not about changing your story, it's more about making it relatable. Instead of saying, for example, you oversaw compliance under OMB Circular A-123, you might say you monitored risk and compliance programs aligned with executive level performance standards. So we want to use clear outcome-focused language, and wherever possible, connect your role to business results. Because even if we weren't selling things that much in the federal government. Like, we weren't salesmen, we weren't always dealing with money and things like that. Things translate, things relate. So think if you can talk on cost savings, efficiency gains, innovation, customer satisfaction. These are all going to be outcomes that speak to hiring managers. It may take some time and sleuthing to get used to the difference in terminology. You can pay a close attention to how things are written and said in job announcements. That will start giving you an idea, okay, this is the language they use, this is how I should mirror it in my own resume. You can look at their company websites, articles, and again, going back to employees in the private sector, how do they write out their resume bullets or their LinkedIn profiles? What terminology are they using? Just a few examples to get started. All right, so now we've translated your experience here. We want to take it kind of from that good resume to being more competitive through personalization. Remember, resumes get you interviews, interviews get you jobs. So the resume needs to directly speak to the job you're applying for. So step 4 is to customize and tailor your resume for each opportunity. Now, this may sound time consuming, but it is essential. Private sector employers want to see alignment. They want to feel like your resume was written with their role in mind. You can make this easier ahead of time by, creating a large template resume where you put all the things you've done, all the accomplishments, anything that you can think of. That's not going to be your resume, but it's going to be your template so that when you go to apply for a job, you have a tailored resume where you can pull the most relevant things. And then, of course, incorporate the keywords, incorporate the most relevant skills that you see in that job announcement. So just like we were just saying, start with the job description, pull out keywords. What are the main responsibilities? What tools or methods are emphasized? And then again, mirror that language in your resume wherever it fits your experience. We're going to want to also structure your resume in a way that private sector recruiters are used to seeing. So that might mean some sections that we don't always use in federal, like a professional summary at the top, a skills or competencies section, and then your experience, education, additional relevant categories. But again, remember to limit it 2 pages maximum. Think of your resume like that marketing material. You want it to be clear, compelling, and relevant, not a full autobiography. They don't have time for that, unfortunately. All right, last step. We are going to get into incorporating AI tools. This probably might be sounding like a lot at this point. Don't worry, you don't have to do it all alone. There are some excellent tools to help you along the way. So, step 5, incorporating AI tools to refine and streamline your transition process. One of the things the university offers is Hiration, our AI resume builder that provides professional templates, immediate feedback, and really can help you actually align your content with job descriptions. We'll show an example of that in a moment if you haven't worked with it yet. You can also use AI chat tools like Copilot, also included if you are a student, or of course there's all the other chat tools that are available out there now. So whatever your choice is, make sure that you're using targeted prompts to make adjustments. For example, you could take a job description from a role you were in or are in the federal government and say, what transferable skills can be drawn from this federal role? Or you can then say something like, suggest private sector job titles equivalent to this position. When you start writing that resume, you can say, rewrite this paragraph, turn it into bullets to remove government jargon and sound more corporate. So these tools can be great for brainstorming or speeding up edits, but remember, always start with your own resume as a base, your own words, or it will be very obvious, and we don't want all the resumes sounding the same. And of course, always check for accuracy in what it is providing. All right, so now that we have gone over our 5 steps to transitioning a federal resume to private sector, I want to briefly show an example of a before and after resume that made the transition and how to put some of those AI prompts into action. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and open up. First, I want to show you an example of a federal resume. And I won't lie, this is actually my old federal resume. Blocked out my personal information, but you can see here, this is actually pretty long. We get up to 6 pages, but for those of you who've been in government, you know that sometimes they were 20, 30 pages I've seen, which is just crazy. But it's pretty crowded. We have a lot of details in there, including, taking up a lot of spaces, that full site address, supervisor info, hours worked, dates of employment, condition, your GS level, all of that. And then you can see instead just like a few bullet points for each position, it goes into a lot more detail. I had my primary responsibilities, but also I broke it down into some most relevant categories, depending on what I was last applying for. And then I kept my accomplishments separate. You can see it's common in federal to use full paragraphs, but even then they're transitioning now more toward bullets as well. So yes, you can see long, lots of detail, even though it does only cover about, well, a little more than 10 years. We have a long list of trainings, awards. It's basically everything. So relevance wasn't key when I made this. It was federal, so it was put it all in there. That's how it used to be more. So we need to get it down to 2 pages. And again, that's where Hiration can come in. So here is the Hiration app, the website. And you can see I took that resume. I chose a simpler template. You can see it's cleaner. And then I plopped it in. And I'm going to show you how I used AI. And also, of course, just, taking things out on my own to match more of that private sector style. So you see I added a summary. We have a key skills section. And that first job that was, a page and a half is now 6 strong bullet points highlighting the most relevant things to a job that I chose to show as a sample. So since my previous experience was in education with our federal lands and interpretation, I chose a job sample that relates most in the private sector with the Appalachian Trail Conservancy. So it still has education, it has giving programs, trainings, workshops, things like that. So I thought this would be a good example just to show how to change that resume. So this is where we're going to bring AI in. Let me go ahead, I'm going to copy this whole job description. You see we have the responsibilities, the demands, and this is where we can bring in Copilot. So for example, if I just paste that entire job description in, go to the bottom, and then say something like, rewrite this section of my federal resume to match this job description in 6 bullet points. Maybe I also want to get a little more specific to make sure that they're keeping accomplishments and quantifiable data. So we can add highlighting achievements and quantifiable data. And then I will go ahead and take that first job. Like I said, it's long, it's almost a page and a half. And we're going to combine those responsibilities and achievements and see what Copilot suggests. Now, I'm not going to immediately just copy and paste it. Again, we're always going to double check it. We're going to see if we like how it's written, if it's accurate. All right, well, we can see we have narrowed it down to 6 bullet points. We have our quantifiable data. These numbers look accurate to what I already had in my resume, so it doesn't look like they made any up. That is something that has happened in the past. If you mention like include quantifiable data. It might just add some for you, so you have to make sure those numbers are in there yourself and check them. But see how that took that page and a half, and what it also did was not just narrowed it down, but it looked at that job announcement. It looked at the key skills and things they were looking for, such as community partnership was mentioned in there a lot, logistics, communications, training, reports and things. And it made it down to 6 bullet points for me. Pretty amazing, right? Other things you could write in here, you could say like, what are the key skills for this job? That could help you to create your skills section. All of those prompts that we gave in the last one. And the great thing about hydration, you can easily move your sections around. You can easily add and take things out. Whereas, if you're just doing it in a Word doc, that can really mess with the format, make things a little difficult. So yeah, that is an example of how I got that really long resume down to 2 pages using those 5 tips we talked about, making sure I'm only using the most relevant bullets, incorporating those achievements, the data, and all that. All right, let's get back to our last slide here. So to quickly recap, we talked about our 5 steps today to transition that resume with extracting our key accomplishments, identifying those transferable skills, translating your experience, customizing, and leveraging AI tools. So by following these steps, you're not just tweaking a federal resume, you're creating a new one, a competitive, private sector ready career document. It's going to tell your story in a way hiring managers will actually understand and value. And remember, Career Services is here for you. We offer tailored coaching. We can work with you on your resume and provide feedback, help you with the transition. We also have a lot of resources available immediately if you want to work on your own through CareerLink. You can access that through your eCampus or careerlink.apus.edu. And our YouTube channel. Like I mentioned before, the other resume webinar series, we have a lot of other videos. We had a transitioning career series that we did earlier this year that you might find helpful as well. So just remember, you got this, and we are here to help every step of the way. Thank you for joining today. Hope you have a great rest of your day.